Good morning, all. My name is Andy Wenninger, and I am the moderator for our seminar today, our webinar today. I work with Premier Planning as a regional manager and cover parts of Wisconsin and Minnesota and a little bit into Ohio and into Iowa as well. Today, we're going to be listening to Jamie Allar. Jamie is a multi-million-dollar producer. She has spent 14 years doing pre-need, works currently with 8 different funeral homes, and runs her own pre-planning agency called Epilogue Planning. She has had extensive use of 1035 exchanges in her business. So at this time, I'm going to turn our webinar over to Jamie Allar.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Andy. Today, I'd like to address an option that's often overlooked in pre-need, and it's one that I believe if you can become comfortable with, it can help you to get more appointments and close more business, which is something we're all looking to do to help more families. In fact, I'd like to share an example from an appointment I had just yesterday. It started as what I would call a lukewarm direct mail lead that I called and called them for an appointment. Was initially told I already have life insurance as a reason she didn't think we should need to meet. And I remember early in my career when I would be met with that objection, it would always be a big obstacle. And once I got a better understanding of insurance in general and 1035s in general, it's really helped me to kind of push through that objection and use it to my advantage and to the client's benefit. So after I asked a few questions with this lead about her policy, I suggested it might be worth a few minutes just to review it and see if it might be a possibility that we could help her protect it with a trust. And right away, she knew I was willing to work with what she already had. So her walls started to come down. And when I looked at her policy yesterday, I found it was a great fit for a 1035 exchange. So it really created an overall win for everybody, which is really what motivates all of us in this business. So it helped to eliminate her concern that she had about what if she would need to qualify for Medicaid. And I offered her an alternative to her current plan, which had some risks if she does get sick and goes into a nursing home. I showed her how I could save her money, and I helped make things easier for her family down the road. So we'll start by kind of addressing what is a 1035 exchange. And essentially, it's a surrender that you, as the agent, complete for the customer. And it directly funds a new pre-need policy from that cash value. And by doing so, the customer is not taxed on any investment gains that are earned in the original policy. Another way to look at it is that a 1035 exchange is a replacement where the policy being replaced has cash value that we can use. An exchange can also take place with non-qualified annuity contracts. So why should you think about offering a 1035 exchange? Well, I believe it's very client focused. It offers a value that we currently don't have, which is protection and also convenience for their family. It's very easy for the customer because they don't need to call their current company or fill out any forms. They don't have to go through that hassle with an insurance company. We do all the paperwork for them. Also, they have that possible tax advantage if this was a client that was considering surrendering their policy, which could cause a taxable event for them. This would eliminate that tax. You can help someone to replace an outdated policy. Many of our customers have policies that were never really purchased with the intention of using it for funeral expenses, and it may not be the best policy for that job. It helps them to protect their asset with an irrevocable trust. And many clients have heard of a trust that, of course, they associate with having to pay big money for. Obviously, this is a free trust that positions you as the expert. And other agents aren't talking about the risks of their policies. Most agents don't know what happens if Medicaid comes into play. So this really helps you to be the expert in this area. And of course, it's going to help you serve more families, which is a win for you, a win for them, most of all, and also a win for your funeral home. So what makes a 1035 exchange a good fit? Well, first I look for a few things. That the customer has identified that this is really their funeral policy that they've at least earmarked in their mind. Also, if they don't have the ability to pay in a lump sum, they really are depending on this particular policy. And then secondly, the policy that they have has cash value. We can't exchange a term policy because there's no cash value, obviously. If the customer understands that their cash value would be considered an asset in the event that Medicaid could be needed, and they desire to be proactive and protect their cash value. This also does work in an event of an actual Medicaid spend down. I know a lot of our clients come to us and they're told by their social workers or the ADRC that they have to cash in their policy and buy a funeral trust. Well, there may be a way to do that for them, but have a better end result for them that doesn't result in any tax liability, and it also eliminates the hassle for the family of having to deal with that insurance carrier. And it's worth mentioning that your customer may have a universal policy. If this is something that you encounter, it's important to know how this type of policy typically works, because if a customer wants to use a universal policy as their funeral policy, it would be a disservice to them not to educate them on why that might not be a great idea. With an older universal life policy, the cost of insurance typically was inexpensive in the early years of that policy when the customer was younger. And the cash value accumulated, but as the customer gets older, usually in their 70s and 80s, is when the cost of insurance increases. And that isn't always obvious to the consumer because they're not paying it as an increased cost in their premium. Instead, it comes out of the cash value. And at some point, the cash value disappears. And when it does, the entire cost of insurance will be out of pocket for that client to keep it in force. So imagine having a policy, let's say it has a $50,000 death benefit at age 85, the cash value is nearly gone. And then this person ends up on Medicaid. And to keep the policy going is now, an absurd amount. It could be $900 a month. And Medicaid's only going to allow them to keep $45 a month. So this customer could have converted their cash value at age 75 into a prepaid burial contract, and they would have been much better served. So again, it's important to know the intended use of the policy, and knowing how a policy will work in the long run to address that family's funeral expenses and possibly Medicaid is something that very few other life insurance agents can do effectively. And using the 1035 exchange option has really helped me to understand other policies and just how valuable a trust and a funeral policy with that trust can be. So it is important to talk about the potential drawbacks. First, and probably most important, to make sure your client isn't left short of coverage. So customers don't always understand the difference between a death benefit and cash value. I find most people find life insurance to be quite confusing, and it's really critical that we don't upset our families. And that may be family members who aren't part of your conversation. So I always try to get a feel for who else might want to know about making changes to a policy. If they're still paying a premium on their current policy and you're looking to set up a new payment plan, will they qualify for same-day coverage? Imagine surrendering a policy for a new one that has a 2-year graded death benefit. And let's say that insured died in year 1 or 2. That would be a disaster for everyone. So another drawback for you as an agent is that the process to get a new policy issued from a 1035 exchange is oftentimes about 6 weeks. I think the quickest I've ever seen is about 4 weeks, but technically the surrendering company has up to 6 months to try to retain that policy, which leads to another potential drawback, which is upsetting the agent who's been replaced. I try to ask a few questions as to who they purchased their policy from. Chances are, if their agent is a close friend or a family member, you may find yourself in an uncomfortable situation. So chances are they may not have that same agent anymore, especially if it's an older policy, or maybe it's a policy they bought through the mail or something like AARP. But it's worth noting that you may not be winning popularity contests with an agent if you're replacing their policy. So talking about the must-haves, some things you need to know about an exchange. First, there has to be cash value. Without it, there's nothing to exchange. Also, it must be a like for like. In other words, a whole life to a whole life, an annuity exchange to an annuity. Also, the insured and owner from that surrendered policy must match that in the new policy. And the funds must be non-qualified. So if you're exchanging from an annuity, the original funds can't have been tax deferred like is often the case in a retirement rollover account. Some things to avoid: changing ownership or the insured, of course, you can't do that. And here would be a good example. Let's say that a husband has a $20,000 cash value in his policy, and he really wants to split that into a policy for him and his wife, each $10,000. That can't be done in a 1035 exchange. And if you, I guess you could, but what would happen on the other end is the full $20,000 cash value would be subject to taxability, just like a surrender would be. You can't isolate that $10,000 exchanged for the husband and just surrender part of that cash value for the wife's portion. The full amount would be subject to any tax consequence. An endowment policy, typically that matures at a certain age. Those don't qualify for a 1035 exchange, nor do first to die policies. And finally, it's important to know that if there's an outstanding loan on the policy you're looking to exchange, it could result in, again, a tax liability for that unpaid loan amount. When in doubt, it's always best to ask questions about their policy. Chances are they're not going to know. What I typically will do is make a phone call to the company yourself in the presence of your client, and generally what I'll do is identify myself, let them know the name of the insured that I'm there with. I'll pass the phone to the client. They'll give the customer service rep permission to talk to me. So we're able to help them by asking the questions that, you know, they're not going to know what to ask themselves. Which leads me to some exploratory questions. I'm assuming that this presentation will be made available to everyone in email format. So these questions are just a list that I've come up with over the years. I like to ask when I'm working with a customer who's indicated they want to use a policy to pay for their funeral expenses. And as I mentioned earlier, many customers truly don't understand their policy and whether or not it's the right tool for the job. And truth be told, for many years, I didn't truly understand a whole lot about life insurance. I've had a license for 14 years, but the first 5 years or so, I made a very good living just sticking to the basic single pay premium. And if a client surrendered their policy to purchase mine, I didn't want to know about it. In fact, I was told that replacing a policy was a bad thing and it could red flag my license. So I kind of still steered clear of replacements and 1035 exchanges. They weren't really on my radar. Now I probably average about 20 or so 1035 exchanges every year. And I can say with a fair amount of confidence that in those cases, the families I helped were some of the best referrals that I've gotten. They gave referrals because they felt I did them a great service. So there's a lot of junky policies out there. And if we can help our families to do better, I feel we owe them that. So these are some of the questions that I go through with folks. So let's say you're ready to start presenting a 1035 exchange as an option, and let's say you get to the point where you're writing your first policy. What do you need to know? Well, the great thing about them is that they really are super easy. It's 2 extra forms. One you're probably already familiar with, which is the replacement form. It's included in all the contracting folders from NGL, but you're likely not using a lot of them. The second is the 1035, the section 1035 form, which is form number 2337. It's a 3-page document, but only 1 page is to be completed. The first 2 pages are instructions on what to do, and it's very straightforward. If your customer has their original policy, they do ask that you include it. Personally, I usually check it as lost because I want the customer to keep that in their possession in the event their death occurs before that 1035 is completed. I'm always sure to tell them, though, to destroy it or write canceled on it so that the family doesn't stumble upon it after their death and figure that they have this death benefit in force. So preparing your client, it's also important to prepare your client for what's next. Let them know that the new policy may take 6 weeks to 6 months to complete. I know NGL does a good job of updating and kind of calling the forwarding company to see kind of where the process is at, hopefully in an attempt to move it forward. But let your client know that they may get a letter or a phone call from a representative from their original policies company. Their effort is going to be to retain the business. And before I leave a customer at the conclusion of a sale of a 1035 exchange, I always ask them to tell me again why this is important to them. Make them sell me so that I'm confident they're not going to have a change of heart when that agent calls them from the other company. Also, let them know that a 1035 exchange will not result in them having to pay tax, but that a 1099-R will arrive at tax time. The R stands for reporting, and they need not to be concerned about paying tax on an exchange because they'll be receiving that form. So before taking any questions that might be out there, I just want to circle back to my appointment yesterday where I presented the 1035 exchange as an option. The reason it ended up being a great option was because this particular customer had a policy with New York Life, which is obtained typically through AARP. She was paying $75 a month roughly. She was a healthy 75-year-old, and she had a policy with a death benefit of $13,000. Her cash value was $2,000, and her anticipated funeral needs were very basic, about $4,500. What we were able to do is roll over the cash value, and for the remainder of her need, we were able to set up a new payment plan through NGL, where she would be done paying in 5 years. She would have her prices guaranteed. It would be no hassle for her kids, which was the biggest benefit to her, but also offer her that protection if she does end up in a nursing home. So she really found it to be valuable. My philosophy has always been present the options, present the pros and cons, and let the customer decide. And in this case, to her, it was really a no-brainer. Her payment plan on the 5-year with NGL Series 4 ended up being less than what her payment is now. So really, she was just after the peace of mind to know that her funeral would be taken care of no matter what. So I hope you found this time spent to be valuable and that you'll benefit from the information that helps you present the 1035 exchange as another tool for your pre-need toolbox. Are there any questions that have come in, Andy?
There aren't, but if anybody does have a question, please feel free to type it into the questions box. We'll be happy to answer it. I'll give you a minute or so here if someone has a question for Jamie.
And I did include my email as well as my phone number. I'm always happy to help a fellow pre-need agent, and love to hear from anybody out there.
I want to thank you, Jamie. You did a wonderful job describing 1035 exchanges and how to go about using them.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
It doesn't look like we have any questions, so we appreciate all of our attendees being here and learning. Premier Pre-Need Marketing is going to continue with our series. So we did have one question here. Hang on a second, Jamie.
Okay.
See if I can see it. Douglas asked, I'm not sure about the cash value being used. So Jamie, if you want to touch on that, cash value. See.
I'm not sure I understand the question, Douglas. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Well, he's not clear on how the cash value is used. From Lisa Douglas. So we understand, Lisa, I think I'm getting your drift. The cash value that's in the existing policy that the client owns is basically transferred from their existing policy to the new policy to fund the new policy. But because it doesn't go back to the client at any point, it maintains that tax-free status. They're just exchanging the cash value in one to purchase another. Does that answer your question? And if not, you can always feel free to contact Jamie directly, and she might be able to help you with that.
Yeah, so just to kind of elaborate on the case I had yesterday, what actually will end up happening when we write that up is the cash value, which was $2,000 from her New York Life policy, will roll over and purchase a Series 4 single premium payment. So she'll have one policy that's paid in full as a single payment, and then the other policy will fund over a 5-year period the remaining $2,500 that she'll need for her funeral expenses. One goods and services form, but 2 policies. One is paid up, one is paid over 5 pay.
Lisa Douglas asks, what makes a 1035 exchange different from just getting cash value from the old policy?
So it's a good question. If we go back, I think in one of the first slides here, I addressed that. So really the difference is a couple things. It's client focused because it's not going to require that customer to have to deal with the insurance company. A lot of times, if you leave it up to a client who wants their cash value out to fund their funeral, if you leave it in their hands, they may have frustrations when they're dealing with, in this case, New York Life. If this lady called New York Life, if she got through to them in a timely manner, that's one of the keys, timely manner. They would probably have to send her a form. She'd fill it out, send it back. It's back and forth with the insurance company. So you can eliminate that. It just simply takes that cash value. NGL will talk to New York Life in this case, and they will receive that payment from New York Life directly. And in that process, there's also the possible tax advantage, because when a person surrenders their policy, any accumulated growth on that policy could be taxed. Whereas with a 1035 exchange, you're eliminating that. 1035 exchange is really an IRS term, and it indicates trading one policy for another or one annuity for another. And because you're going from one to the other, there would be no tax consequence. So that would be another reason. So those two reasons, I would really encourage you to think about using a 1035 exchange as opposed to a surrender.
And I think that's a great answer to that. It's more the tax consequences that benefit the client in that scenario.
Yeah. But don't underestimate the customer focus part either, because I don't know about you, but the last many times I've been on hold with an insurance company trying to get information on a policy. They're not always real easy to get a hold of. First of all, you can stay on hold for a long period of time. Some of our older clients just really don't have the desire or the patience for that. And then to try to navigate and get their money out is not always as easy as if the role were reversed and they were trying to purchase a policy. So, really kind of sheltering your client from having to deal with that is a great value that you can bring to them.
Yes, I agree. And no matter what company you're working with in your pre-need, they all have 1035 exchange forms that are available to their agents.
Sure.
Doesn't necessarily, we talked and used NGL today specifically, but any one of the pre-need companies that Premier works with has their own 1035 exchange that's available to their agents.
Right. Great point.
Very good. I think that answers our questions. Thanks, Lisa, for submitting that. Again, if there are any further, you've got Jamie's number, and we're happy to answer any of those questions. Thank you for your time today. Our next webinar will be 2 weeks on Tuesday at 10 o'clock. Please see the schedule as it comes out. Thanks much. Enjoy your day.